Hello and welcome to Internet, and today I'm going to show you how to bleed the brakes on your Ford Mustang S197, but to be honest the procedure's been pretty much the same for the vast majority of cars that I've ever worked on or owned. And to do this is you're going to need pretty much everything that you see in front of you, plus a jack and jack stands. So what we've got here, we've got an empty container to put the old brake fluid into, we've got the new DOT 4 brake fluid, we've got some nitro gloves and a rag, an 11mm closed spanner, and I'm going to do this for the first time today. I'm going to use this vacuum pump. Now, traditionally I've always used the homemade brake bleeder. I've got my prime bottle there at the ready just in case this doesn't work, and I'll show you what I do to do a homemade brake bleeder. Plenty of videos on YouTube on that already, but this one I want to do a comparison between this vacuum pump, which costs 20 bucks I think off Amazon, I'll leave a link in the description, versus, well, pretty much free, a couple of dollars for an empty juice bottle or something like that. So keep that in standby just in case we go back to the old method, but I want to try this out first. And the way this works is it hooks up to the brake bleeder screw, and you compress the pump in, get some vacuum on it, open up the brake bleeder screw, and it's supposed to suck all the fluid out into this container here. So let's have a shot at this and see how we get on. Alright, so we have the car up on jack and jack stands. I'm going to start with the rear, because normally with every car you start from the wheel that's furthest away from the brake cylinder, the brake reservoir in the engine bay. So the brake reservoir is in front of the driver here on the engine bay, so the furthest wheel away is this one, passenger rear. So we start with the passenger rear bleeding, finish that. Start with the driver rear bleeding, finish that. Passenger front bleeding, finish off with the driver front bleeding. And that is pretty much, well, all the cars I've worked on, that's been usually the pattern that you go by. But if you've got a different make or model, follow the instructions for that one. But this one, that's what we're doing. Right, if anyone's interested how to jack up the rear of your Mustang, I've got a low profile jack here that I've just slid in and jacked up using the centre of the rear differential, and then put a jack stand on either of the shafts on either side. And that's absolutely fine if you're doing this type of work on the brakes on each side. Alright, before you hit any of the bleed screws at any of the four corners, get out the old turkey baster or any kind of vacuum pump or something and just get out as much of the old fluid as you can from the reservoir. You can see the colour of it there, it's not too bad. I've seen a lot worse, but I don't know when this fluid was last changed in this car. So I'm just going to get out as much as I possibly can and pour in some new stuff. And here goes the new stuff. You see the colour difference there, it's just transparent with a yellow tint. It's nowhere near the colour of the old rubbish that was out of it. And you want to top this back up. I sometimes go above the max level here just a little bit, because you're going to suck a lot of it out, starting at the rear caliper. So fill it right up to the top. Alright, just to make sure the pump worked, I did the passenger side rear first. It kind of worked, and you'll see why in a minute. This is now the driver's side rear, so this is the second bleed screw that we're going to go for. First thing to do is locate your bleed screw, which is here. And on these cars they've got a little nice rubber cap on them. Just looks like that. Set that to the side, and you've got a bleed screw right there. So what you do is you put the end of your vacuum hose onto the bleed screw nice and tight, or if you've got a 11mm spanner that's a closed wrench like this, put it on first and then attach the pipe, the hose from the vacuum pump. And then you should build the pump up to about 25 on the outer reading here. Make sure it's got a tight seal, which this one seems to. And it's not leaking, that's just below 25, that'll do. But it's not going down, which means you've got a tight connection with the bleed screw. And then you loosen the bleed screw. And when you're doing this, Make sure this pressure doesn't drop to zero. You don't want to introduce air back into the system, so keep this pumped or shut off the bleed screw when you're not doing it. Right, you'll notice when I start doing this, look at all those air bubbles coming out. Now I don't think that's in the brake lines, I think that's coming from the thread of the bleed screw being brought out by the vacuum pump, because normally when you do this using the old way you get a steady stream of the darker brake fluid coming out and you can see if there's any air bubbles in the line, but with this you see I'm shutting it off there and then opening it back up just to see what's going on, but there's too many air bubbles. Right, and when you're doing this, go and check the front reservoir and make sure it's not dropped below acceptable level, and if necessary, top it back up. So it did extract quite a bit of fluid losing that, but it took too long and just too many air bubbles for my liking. I think we'll try the old way. Right, so it did the job, it got the old fluid out, but it was just too many air bubbles for my liking. I'm not so keen on seeing that, I prefer seeing the steady stream. Plus, we did have a slight issue with the vacuum pump, which meant I was constantly having to build up pressure in it. And the reason for that is this thing has developed a leak of air somewhere around the O-ring in this canister, because every time I built up pressure towards the end there, you heard it releasing from the canister. I tried a second O-ring on it and the same effect happened. You just get too many air bubbles in this line here for my liking, and it was taking an ice age to fill this even to half full of brake fluid to see the different colour coming through. So basically, to hell with that. I'm not interested in wasting my time trying to figure out how this works. There's a better method, old school method. There's the old O-ring that I took out and I replaced it with another one. Made sure it was bang tight, make sure these were all tight, make sure every connection was tight, everything was. You can still hear the air coming out. Once you built up to about 25, just came out. Yeah, by the way, off camera, I tried all these little connectors on the bleed screw just to see if it made any difference, and this was the smallest one that came with the kit. It's actually looser on the bleed screw than the end of the hose. So tried that. None of these fittings, none of these things are designed to go over the bleed screw, so this came with it as well. It seems to be a chunkier version of these, but it was far too small of a hole there to put over the bleed screw, so I did try everything that I could. But this pump's pretty good for just getting power steering out of the power steering reservoir or getting brake fluid out of the brake fluid reservoir, but as far as the bleed screws are concerned, not for me, didn't work. So, alright, so you saw me hooking that up there, and I've just put everything back into the box here as it was, because I'm going to go back to the old way. I'm going to bring in Mr. Prime bottle here, and I'm going to make my homemade brake breather again, because I've chucked my old bottle out, so I thought this would be good. But as you saw there, it did work, it did pull the fluid out, but the problem I've got with it is, when you crack open the brake bleeder screw, you get a lot of what I would call false air bubbles, and this is pulling air from, I'm guessing, the threads in the brake bleeder screw, and it's basically pulling it through the tube there into the cylinder, so you do get the fluid there. But what you can't do is, you can't really tell if you've got any genuine air bubbles in the system or not, and I don't like that. Using this old method, I'll show you, it just comes through as basically a solid line of fluid without any air bubbles in it at all, and you can visually see whether you've got a problem. Whereas with this, oh, I'm not convinced. It's just, let's go for this. Let's make an old style method that worked every single time. And to be honest, I'm probably getting lazy trying this. I prefer this method. Let's go for it and we'll see the difference. Alright, so what you want to do is you want to drill a hole right in the middle of this that's roughly the same size as the tube or the pipe that you're going to use to put onto your brake bleeder screw. And the way I judge it is, You get a drill bit, and if it roughly fits in the centre, you start with that, and if you need to go a bit bigger, you go a bit bigger. But you start off small, make it too big, it's just not going to work. I need to go a bit bigger. Okay, before you do that, you want to take off any of this packaging here, because you need the bottle to be clear so you can see what's going on. So we'll just take off the packaging. So once you've got that cut off we go. And you want to put this in until it reaches the bottom of the filler. Reaches the bottom of the bottle. There we are. And this pipe here, this hose here, give us a little bit more, there we go. Should point that way. Brake bleeder screw there, air bubbles go up there, and we'll fill this to about a quarter full with brake fluid, so that if any air gets sucked back in when you're pumping the brake pedal, it sucks in fluid, not air. So there we go, a homemade DIY brake bleeder. Oops, forgot one thing. Drill a little pilot hole in here, just a little breather hole, using a very small drill bit. Like that. Alright, so we've got our homemade brake bleeder hooked up. We've got some old brake fluid in the bottom of it, and we've got our pipe going on to the brake bleeder screw. I've already done the passenger side rear. This is the driver's side rear. Only reason I'm videoing this side is I've got more space on this side of the garage, the way the car's sitting. So done the passenger side rear, and wait till you see the difference in this now. Let's go. Right, so crack open the bleed screw. And there's already a little bit of fluid wanting to come out. And we'll go and we'll press the brake pedal around 10 times. That's much better just doing it the old-fashioned way. So this will close off the bleed valve. See the difference there though? Look at the fluid. You can see it. No air bubbles, and you saw it coming through there. And you see the difference in colour between the fluid in the line now and the dirty fluid that's in the bottle. So we know we've got the new fluid coming through that brake line and coming out. So you've got fluid still in this line. If you release the hose slightly off the valve, the air will suck it back into this container or barrel of prime. Just give it a little bit of gas, a little bit of air coming in, and it will suck the fluid. See it? And that way you don't spill a single drop. And it all goes back into the container. There we are. I always have a rag handy just in case, and what I do is I give it a little squirt of brake cleaner once we're finished, just to make sure. Just a little bit around the bleed valve. There we go. And put the cap back on. And we're good to go. Excellent. Right, so that depleted the reservoir quite a bit, but we'll just refill it, and as you can see, the fluid's looking a lot better than it was at the start. Still dark, but that's Mostly probably because this bottle's not the cleanest, but it is better than it was. So let's do the front two and that's job done. So I'm going to go ahead and do the front two using the old school method, which works for me. I watched a couple other YouTubers trying these pumps out and seeing what they look like, and there's always a little air bubbles coming, which is fine. The bleed screw does let out a little bit of air, but that was ridiculous, and I just knew something wasn't right with it. So, oh, for all it cost, I'm not even going to bother sending it back. If anyone's got a comment to see why this perhaps is doing what it's doing and not working as well as it should, let me know. But to be honest, no school, old school. Sometimes I like the old method better. So let's get the car back together, and I can't say I recommend this. It's not one for me, but you might have better luck with it than me. But you're just as quick doing it the old way. Yeah.